And coming up on this week's Green Signals podcast, is HS2 Phase 2 about to be revived? We discuss an important new report to government that says we cannot leave the West Coast Main Line to collapse. Richard takes a trip on the UK's most exciting freight train with GB Railfreight. He also gets to go behind the scenes on Network Rail's new measurement train. It really is a jolly special. And we have a lovely story about the All Aboard to Northampton project. So welcome to Green Signals, your railway podcast from me, Nigel Harris, and
me, Richard Bowker.
Here we are again. The weeks fly by. First of all, thanks to these wonderful people who left us super thanks on YouTube again this week. You are Peter Harrison, Chris Exley-Smith, Neil Ferguson-Lee, a friend of ours, a heritage leader from the Ecclesbourne Railway, Roddy Jenkins, Paul Roberts, Edward Southgate, and Colin Brace. We really appreciate all of you who leaves us super thanks, so thank you very much indeed from all three of us.
Absolutely. And we also launched our membership programs last week.
Hooray.
We do, hooray, absolutely. And we do want to welcome our new members.
Yay.
So, well, this is going to take a few minutes because...
I'm going for a coffee.
Well, yeah, but it's extraordinary, right? Just how many people have joined the program. Thank you. Thank you from all of us. It's brilliant. I'm just about to read out, as we said we would, those who've joined the silver and gold tiers. Those who've joined at bronze level, as well as all the silver and gold, you'll be able to see your names on a ticker tape in the good news section at the end of the program, because we want to acknowledge everybody. But these are the gold and silver members. Are you ready?
Right. Deep breath, Richard.
Stephen Bates, Adrian Gould, Alan Gerard, James Barlow, John Pooler, Red Lester, Andrew Bellamy, Stephen Holliday, the Independent Brigline Rail Group, Trevor Stone, David Adgey, Ian Stewart, Chris Exley-Smith, Richard Hill. And then we have Andy Fisher, Simon Wadsworth, Ryan Watson, Peter Miller, Barry Jones, Robert Price, Stephen Pritchard, Steve Roberts, Robert Cohen, Sean Harris, Roy Tate, Norfolk and Good, Trevor Rothwell, Mikey A, Stephen Hutton, John Kirkman, Ranga Rob, BRI 535D, Gordon Webb, Brian Newton, John Manship, and Peter Holden.
I think Norfolk and Good is going to catch one of us out one day, isn't he?
Maybe, maybe not. But anyway, thank you to absolutely everybody. It's just superb. And I hope you're enjoying the new, the special content that we've been putting on that as well. So anyway, really good.
So lots of people signed up on the first day. We're delighted that you're keen to support what we do. Thank you. And please, if you haven't joined, and lots of people haven't, then please come along and do so. You'll find the links to YouTube and Patreon in the description box, or you could just click the join button on YouTube to find out more about what's on offer. We've already got some great exclusive videos in there, Richard, haven't we not? I loved the one about the St Ives branch that you did with your bro down to the Chippy by the sea. That was jolly good fun, it looked like. And there are loads more planned. Paul seemed to enjoy it.
Yeah, we had a great time. He'd never been to St Ives. It was really good. No, I hope people liked that. We've got another one coming out in the next sort of day or so. Anyway, we've got loads and loads planned. So
really looking forward to it. Okay, let's move on to some big news. And last week, just after we recorded, of course, it always is, an important new report led by Juergen Maier was published. Regular listeners and viewers may recall we talked about this quite a bit when it was commissioned by Louise Haigh when Labour were in opposition. I wonder whether she expected it to be published before a general election rather than after. I think maybe she did. We'll never know. If we believe what the press seems to be saying, it would appear there are calls to restart Phase 2 of HS2, amongst other things. Sounds exciting. So do we have a cause for optimism, Richard, or has this been published at a slightly awkward time for the Secretary of State? And does the report say what the Telegraph and Mail say it says?
What the HS2 is about to be revived? No, it doesn't say that, and we'll come to that. I mean, I think they've extemporized that, or whatever the word is, but no, it doesn't.
But what about timing then?
I think it is a bit awkward, actually. It's worth looking at in what it says in a little bit of detail.
Okay.
We're not going to go through it in massive detail this week because we've got loads of other stuff, but it's a bit of a mouthful. It's called the Rail and Urban Transport Review, an assessment and ambition for a new government, that's good title. It's 81 pages long. It's very well, it's beautifully put together. And it really focuses around 5 key themes.
Okay.
Now, I think they have a bit of overlap to me. For instance, theme 2 is accelerating delivery of transport infrastructure across the nation. Fine. And theme 4 is getting the structures right for delivery now and in the future, which kind of feel a little bit overlappy.
They do.
But I suppose overall, Nigel, there's nothing in it that you could start shouting at. There's nothing in it you would disagree with, but there is quite a lot of waffle, I think. And there's lots of committees proposed and stakeholder consultation. We've got sub and pan-national groups. And this probably sounds a little bit naughty. It's not meant to be, but Arup are very heavily involved in this. So if you're familiar with a lot of what they've been saying over the last 20, 30 years, really, over particularly public-private partnerships, you will find some of this quite familiar stuff. So, but look, there's nothing in it that you can go, well, I just don't agree with that, right? It's not like that. So what are the big standout issues? Well, probably the biggest point that it makes, which you will go, I think you'll go, yes, is it says, we do need to have a national strategy for transport that's connected with a wider industrial strategy and one that outlasts parliamentary terms.
Hooray.
Yeah, it's very hard to disagree with that. In fact, you can't. Right? So that's one issue. There is then a bit in it on which is referred to as the Arup 9-point plan for greener, faster, cheaper. Because if you remember, when Juergen was asked to do this report, a lot of it was about why does it take so long to get these things done, right? Now, I'm probably being a bit naughty here, but this 9-point plan would win an award for stating the bleeding obvious, right? But that doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it wrong.
Sometimes you maybe have to state the obvious and we lose sight of it.
Well, I think you do, right? And the reason why I make that point is because the first 3 of the 9 points in the Arup, how to get a project done greener, cheaper, faster, and I'm slightly paraphrasing, but not much. Make sure you've got very clear sponsorship to begin with. Who owns the vision for this and is going to give you the political air cover, I would like to think. Number 1. Number 2, make sure you've got a capable client. And number 3, make sure the project can satisfy outcomes that are affordable and then fix it. And all of those things happen before you deliver a darn thing, really. And I think most of us have been saying for years, actually, running these major projects, in one sense, isn't that hard. If you're clear about what you want, you've got a client who knows what they're doing, and you've got a clear scope, and it is fixed, and open brackets, you don't change anything unless you absolutely have to. That is the bedrock for success. And that's always been my view.
Well, you've said many times on this show about when something goes wrong, the first place you should look is a client.
And I really believe that, Nigel. I really do believe that. Doesn't mean that everybody gets off the hook, but yeah, that's where I would always
look
start.
First.
Yeah, it is the first. The other thing that's interesting, and then we'll come to your HS2 question. The other thing that's interesting is PPP, or public-private partnerships, make a comeback. I suppose in some people's minds, in probably the people involved in this report, it kind of never went away. But I think it's back in the sense that you need public-private partnerships to make some of this stuff happen. Why? because there's probably not enough public money to do them, number one. Number two, there are some benefits of involving the private sector. What it does say, which I do like in it, it says, but before we do that, because you put 100 consultants in a room and you will come up with 101 different models for public-private partnerships. So what it says is we need a definitive sort of Treasury-endorsed playbook that says you can do that, but you can't do that.
Can
right?
I butt in and ask you a couple of questions, as you know lots about this? Am I wrong in my impression that PPPs were really sort of disgraced after the tube thing all fell apart? And I remember lots of stories in the press about where PPPs were in schools and hospitals that, again, I hesitate a little because it was a popular tabloid was saying this, it would cost them £400 to have a light bulb changed. Does that mean to say that PPP is wrong, or it was really badly drawn up?
I mean, it is actually, goes right to the heart of it, actually. The core concept of PFI, as it was originally,
PFI,
private financing, and then the PPPs, I think is actually quite sound. And maybe we should do a piece on this. We can't do it now, but I think we should do a piece and explain. And I will try and explain what PFI and PP projects were all designed to do. Because I had the privilege of working on one of the very first ones, which was the Northern Line tube financing rolling stock deal. So we can do that. But the principle was actually quite sound, which is that there is actually going to be a higher cost of funding if you go down a hybrid model of PFI or PPP model. But if you can value the risk that you've transferred and the contract genuinely does transfer it, and you transfer those risks that the private sector is best able to manage, because risk should always sit with the party best able to manage it, right? If you do all those things, the risk adjusted cost will be less. So that was the principle. And I can go into that in more detail when we come to it, right? So the principle is sound. Your point, were they just done badly? I have seen so many that were shocking, where the client didn't know what they were doing.
And is that where you get the £400 light bulbs from?
I would not be surprised. I don't know for certain because I've never seen that contract, but that would not surprise. And I'll bet you it's not that they specified it wrong. I bet you they didn't even specify it at all.
Yeah.
No. So it's back, but it needs to be brought back properly. And that's what this sort of sets out to do, or say that we need to do. And as to HS2, no, it doesn't say you've got to do it all back. What it does say is it calls for completion of Northern Powerhouse Rail, in effect, i.e. finish off the hybrid build for the bit of Phase 2B that is Northern Powerhouse Rail, upgrades to the East Coast Main Line, an urgent plan for Birmingham to Manchester, which you and I would probably say in concert.
Yes, please.
Phase 2, right? But it's not back. They're not calling for it to come back in its current state. The big problem with all of this, and back to where you started with this, is the timing awkward. Money.
We haven't got any.
And, well, when you've got the Prime Minister doing a speech at Downing Street on the day we're recording this, which is the 27th of August, saying it's going to get a lot worse before it gets any better and it's going to be a tough budget. I don't know. That to me says where the reality of this is at the moment.
Is this looking a bit too deep and crediting them with more intelligence and guile than they deserve by calling it Birmingham Manchester, or where we said the Stafford bypass, and not calling it HS2? Do you think they're trying to slide it through by not calling it HS2?
Well, if that's where we end up, we don't really care, do we?
We don't.
As we've said, I mean, Phase 2A, the Stafford bypass bit, it is argued by some merely moves the problem to Crewe, and that is a challenge, right? But Phase 2A, the biggest single beneficiary actually is the capacity for future freight flows, right? Phase 2B arguably then resolves Crewe, but I think there probably are some things that need to be looked at with that. So, but the critical thing with Phase 2A, it's got the powers. Right,
we keep saying this.
So if you start with a Birmingham to Manchester line from scratch, even though the government appears committed to reforming of the planning process and environmental impact assessments. That's all in this report as well, which is quite good stuff. It's still going to take time.
Years,
people are still going to object. Yeah.
But they could make a start on, here we go, on phase 1 of whatever it is they want to do, which occupies the old phase 2 route, and then phase 2 of the new thing onto Manchester could come second, and they could start.
Right, okay.
Are you still with me?
No. I know what you mean, yeah. Let's hope that's the clever thinking that may be going on. I mean, I haven't met anybody who really thinks that phase 2A is a bad idea in terms of a operational capacity management thing. So let's hope that's what's...
we do need to do the video we talked about, don't we, about the whole...
We do.
Here we go. Colwich.
It's Colwich, yeah.
It is Colwich.
But I also think we need to go through this report in some more detail, Nigel. We need to do that next week. There's some really interesting things in here.
Well, he's a fairly astute chap, is Maier, isn't he? So
the what?
He's a fairly astute chap.
He's a very astute chap. The new chairman of GB Energy, of course.
Yeah.
But there's been some serious people involved in this. You know, Henry Murrison's been involved in this, for instance. There's lots of good people involved in this. So we should give this the airing it deserves.
And I do like that line about we cannot allow the West Coast Main Line to collapse.
Yeah.
So, the fact they've identified that. We shall continue supportively, but being polite but challenging in our usual style, won't we?
Indeed.
So, plenty to talk about still about HS2, and we will keep coming back to it. And all the feedback we're getting from viewers and listeners, or that they're hungry for more detail and explanation about these very complex issues. So we shall do our best, won't we, Richard?
Certainly will.
More detail to come. Now, Richard, it's time. I nearly did a little fanfare then, just stop myself in time. We can finally show your GBRf jolly this week. It's been put off 2 weeks, and finally your excitement can be released.
Yeah, I'm not going to rise to it this time, but yes, this week it is finally in the show. Quick recap. There's a train that runs, a freight train that runs roughly 3 times a week, I think, from North Blyth to Fort William, to the aluminium smelter. It takes alumina. And I caught it from Springburn in Glasgow up to Spian Bridge, just outside of Fort William. And I explain why that happened in the video. I was really lucky. I was hosted by the CEO of GB Railfreight, John Smith himself, who we both know very well. And because because he and I have known each other for far more years than either of us care to remember, we ended up having a good old gossip, and we put the world to rights and had a good laugh as well.
I bet you did.
Yeah. It was good. There's not a confession, but there's a setting expectations, right? The further north we went, unsurprisingly, the weather got worse and worse. And it was at times sort of challenging to do the film, particularly when you're in a Class 66 at sort of full chat going up to Karur. It was quite loud. But anyway, nonetheless, it was a really special trip. And I hope people enjoy the film. And here it is.
Moving south to Wiltshire has probably been our best decision ever, but it means that if you want to go to the West Highlands of Scotland, it's quite the journey. So here we go. Made it to Glasgow Central. About 8 minutes late, but 3 trains all the way from Chippenham, so not too bad. Anyway, now time to find the hotel. Well, here we are in Glasgow on Thursday morning. Started the trip properly. I'm here in George Square, one of the iconic locations in Glasgow. I've got the magnificent new Queen Street station behind me, which is where I'm going to meet my host for this trip. So it's not raining, which is brilliant. So without further ado, let's head on in. So I've just met up with John Smith, Chief Executive of GB Railfreight. We're here at Queen Street Station. We couldn't do anything on the concourse. It's all a bit mad and a bit busy. So we're going to jump on a train to Springburn and pick up a very special freight train there. Just give us a rough idea what we're doing in sort of snapshot stuff.
Richard, we're heading out to Springburn station, where one of our freight trains cuts across the top of Glasgow, heading to Fort William. where we take alumina to an aluminium smelter there for our customer.
Fantastic. So we're doing the West Highland line. I can't say how much I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be really, really super.
Have you been on the West Highland line before, Chuck?
Never in the front.
Ah.
So I'm really looking forward to this. Let's hope the weather holds up as well, so we can actually see where we're going.
Yeah. There's a bit of rain forecast, but you'll thoroughly enjoy it. I guarantee you that.
We're off to Springburn and pick the train up there.
Once we got to Springburn, I asked John about the specific details of the train we were going to travel on, and also a little bit more about the state of freight services in Scotland more generally. So we're here at Springburn and awaiting the arrival of the train. Just very specifically on this train, just give us an idea of what products it's carrying and where does it start from? Just an idea of that.
Yeah, certainly, Rich. This is train is carrying stuff called alumina, which is a powder. Comes from, I think, the ore is bauxite for aluminium, if my memory serves me right. So the stuff is imported to the UK through a facility at Blyth, just north of Newcastle. There's an aluminium smelter in Fort William, so we have a train of tank wagons, twin axle tank wagons that carry the powder from Blyth, left there about 7:10 this morning, down the East Coast Main Line, Berwick, across the Central Belt, and then it's been stood in Moss End for about 15 minutes and she'll shortly be running through Springburn here, where we'll cut over towards the Clyde and then we start to climb up the West Highland line at Helensburgh.
So and it runs how frequently? What's the
well, it's a fair journey and the West Highland line's a bit slow, so you can only get one trip. Normally you try with freight trains to get a rotation a day, but with this, she goes out one day, back the other. So we're either doing 3, sometimes 4 services a week.
Okay, so it's a decent flow then.
Oh yeah,
and a steady flow. And I suppose bigger picture question: what is the sort of general situation with freight in Scotland? Because I think I'm right that this is pretty much the only thing that goes up the West Highland line.
It's not like it was when we were younger.
Many things are not like they were when we were younger.
This is very true. No, this is well, certainly it's the only freight train that I'm aware of that operates on the West Highland line. Right. There's obviously some maintenance trains, but this is about the last. There used to be regular traffic running on it. But more generally in Scotland, the Central Belt still generates a lot of freight, but most of it heading southbound or coming in from the south into the Central Belt. A lot of containerised products, whiskies out. We bring Coca-Cola in some of our services. Tesco, which one of our competitors operates from, Direct Rail Services, do all the Tesco trains. They do actually go further afield into Scotland, so they take a train up to Inverness. I think they go into Aberdeen as well. So for Tesco's, they do distribute things further afield. But once you're out of the Central Belt, north of Edinburgh and Glasgow and a line between them, there's not a huge amount of freight these days, which is a shame.
And what's that down to? Because presumably it's not down to lack of desire. Everybody wants more freight on rail. So what are the blockages to it?
I guess it's volume ultimately. Right. The further north you go in Scotland, the sparser the population. So in the old days, you'd have wagon load trains, and actually the roads weren't that good back in those days. So rail was probably an efficient way of delivering it. But these days, unless particularly for rail freight, you're normally looking, I think as everyone knows these days, for volume that fills a train. That's what makes it efficient. And other than people say, oh, I used to like the wagon load days. And I normally challenge it and go, no, we're still there. No, when you run an intermodal train, you've got anything from rice to computers to whiskey on the thing. So we still do carry mixed products, just not on an asset that's all different shapes and sizes. But again, in Scotland, you come back to volume going further north. There's a few places that are developing rail serve terminals. And again, with DRS, I think it is, there's one of the water companies has created some sidings to the north. So there's attempts to slowly develop it, but it is slow.
We leave Springburn and begin to thread our way through the north side of Glasgow's extensive suburban rail network. We pass Eastfield Depot and Cowlares, and then over to Maryhill, past the locks on the canal, before heading towards Dalmuir and the line to Dumbarton. Our progress is steady, though held at signals occasionally to allow the passing of the frequent local electric trains that ply these busy corridors. After a while we reach Craigendoran Junction and join the West Highland Line proper. The sound of a Class 66 under load, we were pulling over 1,000 tonnes, is quite the experience, and soon the cab is full of the noise of the engine working hard up the gradient towards Helensburgh. Here's John Smith again on his outlook for freight more generally under the new Westminster government.
Don't often get a chance to chat with the CEO of arguably the country's leading rail freight operator. So I've got to ask you this, John. Just had a change of government. Labour's in, and they came in on the back of a lot of promises, particularly around much greater role for the public sector, the state. How do you sort of feel sort of a month on end? Do you still think, feel sort of positive and upbeat?
Well, yeah, the words are good. I mean, the Conservatives had put a growth plan in for rail freight.
Yeah.
If you do the maths, it wasn't huge, but they
But it was growth.
It was growth,
yeah.
And they committed to do that. The King's speech equally reflected once GBR is created, whenever that comes about, and these things always take time, that they would have a remit to grow rail freight as well. And to be honest, actually, I mean, we've engaged with Network Rail post the election, and there's some quite positive things coming out of that. There's we're arguing that we should have capacity and all the other things that we should have, but they're looking to stimulate growth. They've begun to look at the economics of it and say, well, okay, why does it work in some areas but not in others, and what is it that can be done perhaps to make it more competitive with roads? So there's been some very positive discussions around that. I tend to have a view, I mean, my job's to run GB Railfreight, make it successful.
Yeah.
And in as much as that, if just getting on with the day job, managing with the economic cards you've been dealt with is how we do the best for GBR, then I'll do that. If engaging with the politicians or the stakeholder groups serves a purpose for us, then I'll engage with that as well. So at the moment, with the government being so new, you're kind of watching, looking over shoulders going, okay, where do I dip into this? I mean, Peter Hendy, as minister, certainly he's one I've picked up the phone to and said, we need to have a chat, Pete, and just get his spin on how he sees his role now. I mean, some of it isn't party politics. Under the Tories, they had Hugh Merriman, and he was a great guy. He was, ex-chair of the Transport Select Committee. He had a genuine interest in what we do.
And passion. He really wanted to improve it. Yeah, I agree.
So it didn't matter that he was Conservative or Labour. So I was slightly worried that wouldn't be the case with a new government. But with Pete going in there, clearly he's got passion for the industry as well, despite being a bus person. But but we're slowly chipping him and changing him. But so I think that's a good appointment. So time will tell. We'll see.
We pass along the side of Loch Lomond, this extensive and beautiful stretch of water, which at 22.6 miles is one of the longest in Scotland. And we soon arrive at Ardluey, the very northern end of the loch, and have a chance to stretch our legs. I take the opportunity to shoot a bit of film of our train at rest on the platform, and before long the reason for our short stop at Ardluey appears. A southbound ScotRail service, complete with carriage for bicycles, comes out of the block section ahead of us and into the adjacent platform so that we may continue our journey north. The weather is really deteriorating now as we head towards and eventually through the once busy railway junction at Crean-Larrick, once Crean-Larrick Upper. It is still the junction for the line to Oban, but in days gone by, the Callander and Oban line went through Crean-Larrick Lower and crossed under this bridge until its closure in 1965. Now, all trains to Oban use the West Highland line to Crean-Larrick before branching off to the left just north of the station. A brief respite in the rain, and the train is working hard now on the steep gradients.
Bridge of working down. Still follow the signal line under the air, over.
Since 1988, the signalling on the West Highland Line has been controlled from Bannerby Signal Box near Fort William, using a system called RETB, or Radio Electronic Token Block. The driver releases the token for the section just travelled and takes the token for the next section over radio, which Alan, our driver, does here at Bridge of Orkey for the section to Rannoch.
5153, understood. Got permission to proceed from Bridge of Orkey down. Passing Gordon down to Rannoch down, over.
We arrive at the remote Rannoch station, and despite the weather being grim, and since we have to wait again for another southbound ScotRail service, we decide to stretch our legs again. However, it's not the rain that's the issue here, it's the Scottish midges. I take a short bit of video of our locomotive, but the spots you can see on the camera are not rain. That's a swarm of midges. We admit rapid defeat and beat a retreat to the cab of the locomotive and watch the passing southbound service from a midge-free sanctuary. It's getting darker and misty, and filming is proving really challenging as we climb over the most remote section of all, the section from Rannoch to Curragh, the summit of the line. The West Highland Railway was built in two stages. The section from Craigyendoran to Fort William opened in 1894, and the extension to Mallaig opened in 1901. The Mallaig extension was notable for the extensive use of mass concrete in making structures for the line, notably, of course, the iconic and world-famous Glenfinnan Viaduct. The line never made a profit and has always relied on government financial support throughout its life. However, it's not hard to see why it was such an important connection for communities that would otherwise have been cut off. Even today, the roads can be treacherous and slow. The ruling gradient of the line from Craigyendoran to Fort William is 1 in 40, and soon we approach the summit of the line at Curragh. The station at Curragh has the accolade of being the highest station on a mainline railway in Britain, at 1,350 feet. It was originally intended to be just a passing place, but a private station for Curragh Lodge and Estate was opened when the line was built, and then opened for public use in September 1934. Our descent begins almost immediately, and soon we are passing high above Loch Treig, which was dammed in 1931 to create a hydroelectric power scheme for the Lochaber aluminium smelter in Fort William. The dam raised the level of the loch by 35 feet and required the diversion of nearly 1.5 miles of railway. It's the fact that the smelter was built in 1929 in Fort William that provides the work for our train today, delivering the alumina for use in the smelter. Soon we approach Spian Bridge and the end of our journey. The train will continue to Fort William, just a few miles further along the line, but the fairly complex set of shunting moves required there mean it is better and safer for us to alight here. It's almost 20 to 8 in the evening. Our spectacular journey from Springburn has taken us almost exactly 6 hours.
Well, we've made it to Spian Bridge after what has been a really superb trip, really dramatic, thoroughly enjoyed that. Okay, the weather hasn't been the greatest, but that almost kind of added to the atmosphere and the drama, really. So incredibly grateful to GB Railfreight. Thanks to John for organising that, to our drivers today, Jim and Alan. Really superb trip on what is really sort of the last freight service on the West Highland Line, but what a service and what a trip.
Well, that was great stuff, Richard. As usual, good bit of video making, and I have to say again, it's a rough job, but somebody has to do it.
It was very good. It was good. It was interesting to see, and he was just what I know we've said this on a previous show, but very quickly on this, it's just watching him around his people, with his people. It's a kind of a case study in terrific leadership.
It is. Every time you see him interacting with his staff, you think this is how it should be done.
Yeah.
Surrounding himself with the best people and treating them well. It's fairly simple, but John does it brilliantly. Right, moving on to this week's Railway News Roundup. Digital signalling has taken a step forward on the East Coast Main Line with successful dynamic ETCS, that's European Train Control System for us ordinary folk, testing taking place on key passenger and freight trains. A Govia Thameslink Railway's Great Northern Class 381/1 Electrostar unit and the DB Cargo Class 66 successfully completed the tests, hooray, across a range of operational scenarios. Sorry about that.
Put your teeth back in.
I know. They just went a bit wobbly at the minute there, but I caught them in time. The trains will now accumulate fault-free running mileage, hopefully, as the next stage in the testing process. We wish it well, and our finger will be on the pulse.
Indeed. Actually, we're hoping to go and see that as well, which would be really good. This is a lovely story, a nice example of an operator helping local communities here. Northern is offering students half-price school run tickets for the whole of the next academic year. The idea is to encourage more parents to use the train for school runs instead of their cars. It's hoped that students will then get in the habit of travelling by rail and choose it again when they move into further education and work. So good initiative, that.
It is, and it shows somebody at Northern is thinking outside the box on growing the market rather than just managing what they've got, doesn't it? So well
Indeed.
done them. Hope they tell us how it goes. Big fare news now, Richard. Part 1. It has been announced that LNER's fares pilot that withdrew flexible off-peak and super off-peak fares is to be expanded to cover journeys between London and more than 20 stations in the north from the end of September. The 2-year simpler fares trial began in January between King's Cross and Newcastle, Berwick-on-Tweed and Edinburgh-Waverley, giving passengers the choice between anytime full price and fully flexible tickets, cheaper train-specific and inflexible advance tickets, or a new 70-minute flex ticket, which is more expensive but offers the option to start a journey up to 70 minutes earlier or later than the train you booked. We chatted to fares expert Mark Smith, the man in seat 61, about this trial when it was launched. And it has to be said he wasn't a fan, was he, Richard?
No, and he wasn't alone either in that. And actually, he and others have been all over social media, as you would expect this last week, giving this announcement a thumbs down. It is complicated, though, right? It's one of these where it's not entirely black and white, a binary, so we need to look at it. And I think one of the things we've been talking about as a team is whether or not we do a sort of a bit of a fares special covering that, i.e. the LNER issue, but also the big fares news story part 2, which, and many listeners were absolutely gobsmacked at this one. Special thanks to Kirk's Carbridge for sending us through the link to the announcement, actually. That was helpful. And that's the news that ScotRail is it ScotRail? Yeah, Scotland's railway, are abandoning their trial to end peak fares. Now, apparently, the reason that's been given is it didn't generate the modal shift, people moving onto train that was hoped. And it covered only 6.8%, so almost 70% of its cost, but it needed to be 10% to be self-financing. Now, I must admit, I'm a bit irritated by this one because I think this decision's got the potential to undo a lot of really good work that they've been doing up in Scotland over a number of years. And I genuinely thought that once started, this one would kind of carry on in some form. So we'll have to look at this one as well in our fare special, because this could have quite a big impact, I think.
So look forward to that.
Yeah.
And that's the Railway News Roundup this week. Bit shorter because of not one, but 2 videos on this week's show. Richard's been busy. But we'll do more next week. If you'd like to send any snippets of news or even big news that we might not have seen from your area or anywhere in the country that you feel we might have missed out on, you can drop us an email at news@greensignals.org. Don't assume that we see everything either, so please let us know if you see something that's really useful and interesting. We'd rather have people, 10 people mention it than no one mention it. We can't promise to read them all out, but the best ones we will, and we will always name check whoever sends us an email, which we use in the show. So, and on to another one of your jollies, Richard. Maybe we ought to ask Steph to do a graphic jollies special. Although this one actually did look like it was a bit harder work, though it was absolutely fascinating. I loved this one because you had the great privilege of taking a trip on Dr. Yellow, Network Rail's new measurement train, didn't you?
I did. For those who aren't aware, it's a converted HST. It's actually been around for a while now. It's been around 20-something years, I think. It's part of Network Rail's infrastructure monitoring fleet. There's not just the HST, there's other trains as well. It's got some incredible tech on board, which really has transformed the way that Network Rail are able to do plain line track monitoring. So Charlie, one of my kids, is planning to do engineering at university, so was interested, and I got the chance to see it in action, and here it is.
So welcome to Derby Midland Station on a pretty humid day, but an exciting one for us because we're off today on Network Rail's new measurement train, the converted HST that they use to travel around the network, testing and checking on, well, pretty much everything actually. I'm here with Charlie, who's behind the camera, and we're going to be spending a day on the train with the Network Rail guys. So without further ado, we'll go and meet Tracy from Network Rail, and looking forward to what we've got to see.
We were welcomed aboard the new measurement train by Dave Whiston, delivery manager, and by Chris Johnson, head of delivery data collection for Network Rail. We had to get on board promptly as the train was occupying platform at the busy Derby station, something we needed to vacate pronto. As soon as we were on our way, Dave got straight into explaining what the train was all about.
Welcome, we're on board NMT, one of the infrastructure monitoring trains for Network Rail. Other trains are available. They are mine rather than somebody else's. So I've got PLPR1, PLPR2, and then we've got also PLPR3 and 4, and TRU that accompany the NMT in the monitoring of the infrastructure. We have various recording systems on board here, everything from track geometry to overhead line monitoring, and radio signals. Anything that basically makes the rail network run, we monitor it, record it, and feed back to the track engineers to make sure that the passenger trains and freight trains are nice and safe when they run around the network. Our primary system for track geometry is called TrueTrack. The display you're seeing is True Operator, which is presented to the on-train technicians on board the vehicle. The system itself is looking at the 2 rails that we're running on, and then we get a display of several of the channels that are displayed and recorded to the on-train technician. This helps us identify and see how the tracks are performing and whether we've got any track faults should they be presented to the on-train technician. We've got a set of tolerances that we work to for the tracks. So depending on which one of those tolerances gets broken in relation to a track defect, we then action accordingly. So right the way through from minor faults which are produced in the background and then relayed to the track engineers, right the way through to the point that we can actually block the track to any further traffic coming across. So what happens at that point is it gets flagged to us in the exceedances box down here. That then interprets the data into a realistic format that the OTT can then relay back to the track engineers and the MDUs, maintenance delivery units. They can then allocate track teams to potentially go out and fix it. The True Track system has a set of lasers, gyros, potentiometers mounted under the train to look at those tracks. It generates a scanned lasered image of the rail underneath, and it has tuned cameras that look at those lasers across the rails. It then digitizes them, adds factors from the transducers and the accelerometers, and then we produce an output like you're seeing here. Okay, the channels that we get to see, that we're fortunate enough to be displayed, we have twist, so how the tracks sit against each other. We have alignment, so how the tracks are moving left to right. The tops of the rails, so how the tops are performing in relation to dips, joints, etc. Gauge, how far the rails sit apart. We have cant and cant deficiency, so how much we go round a bend. If you think of NASCAR going around a circuit, they feel like they're going straight, but actually they're being held onto that bend by centrifugal forces. Okay, so the next system we've got, relatively new. Again, sort of last 6, 7, 8 years. PLPR, plain line pattern recognition. What that system does, we look at every sleeper, and at every sleeper we make sure that it's got 2 rails attached and then 2 clips either side of the rail holding those in, so 4 clips in total. You might have noticed the railway looks a lot nicer, a lot more uniformed in the ballast profiling, and that is all relation to the PLPR system. Okay, if it doesn't see all the components that it's supposed to, it highlights them and flags them as a candidate to the teams back in Derby. High definition video recording generates insane amounts of data. We can't transmit that off the trains.
Oh, so this gets stored locally and then is put onto what, sort of the high-speed discs or whatever?
Yeah. So we've got solid-state discs that we load every single day. It's one of our bugbears that we have to carry media sets around with us. They're quite hefty black cases. We need at least 1, if not 2, per shift that we do. The information from the PLPR system gets loaded onto the PLPR discs, the media sets, and they get taken back into Derby. Processed generates these candidates that we've been talking about, and then the teams back in Derby have to allocate a fault code relating to any of those candidates and the reasons behind why it's generated an error. So if you think of it, that if it doesn't see one of the components that it's looking for, it then flags it as a, please can somebody have a look at this for us.
I asked Dave how track used to be inspected in the days before the advanced automated systems on board the new measurement train and the other vehicles in the infrastructure monitoring fleet.
Previously, it'd be visually inspected. Right. You would have the track teams walking down the track, covering approximately 5 to 10 miles a night. If you're lucky on a good day, they would have identified any of those missing components visually and probably repaired on site as well. So if they'd seen a missing clip, they'd have picked up their little hammer, banged it back in and carried on walking. Obviously all the systems that we record, you can see not only subsurface from the UTUs, the ground penetrating radar systems, you can see the ballast profiling underneath it. The most important thing about PLPR for us is that it's documented, so it's recordable. So every time that clip comes out, rather than Mr. Track Engineer just knocking it back in, perhaps making a note of it at the end of his shift, now it's actually categorised as it's had a problem at that particular location. If it happens several times, hopefully Mr. Track Engineer will look at it and go, this is a repeating defect. Why is it repeating? They can then go into the other systems that we, as I say, we record and look and perhaps see the underlying condition, why that clip keeps coming out, or why there's a problem at that location. Ultimately, allocating resource to go and rectify it. A couple of the other systems on board the NMT, we have overhead line monitoring called Fraunhofer. Basically looks at the contact wire. It's non-contact, but for the power source of the trains. Looks at heights and staggers. It's non-contact, unlike Mentor, which is a contact system, but basically monitors where and how the performance of the overhead line sits and is working. The other system, the other major system we have on here is GSMR. So
That's the radio system.
It's the radio system. We have very little involvement with that other than turning it on and making sure it's working.
Yeah.
But my understanding is it monitors the communications between the drivers and the signallers. And there's also some commercial measurements going on for phones signals as well on the new system that's been implemented over the next couple of months.
I was fascinated to see that Andy Davidson, the on-train technician, used Quail maps to navigate the remarkable detail of the British rail network. I asked Dave how frequently the trains would traverse each section of track.
Yeah, so depending on the category of the track, depends on how often we have to go and record it. PLPR coming in has sort of dictated that, and that is down to a 4 weekly schedule on the higher category stuff. So your Cat 1A, Cat 1 track, which is what the NMT tends to do, tends to be every 4 weeks. It runs a 4 weekly rotation. Geometry is slightly different, but again, we try and tie that in with the PLPR just to make it easy on the numbers. If there is sections that we don't record, depending on how many times we miss it, we get one chance effectively on here before it starts to get critical for the track engineers. Depends on the category that they allocate that specific recording to. If we don't record it, unfortunately our customers get a little bit grumpy and challenging, and will come back and ask us to go and get that specific bit of track.
The many sections of jointed track on the Skegness line offered us a glimpse back in time to an extent, and although the journey was a little slow on this particular route, it was not long before we arrived at our seaside destination.
Here we are at Skegness. Probably a little bit loud, but I wanted to get a shot with my good friend John Armitt, who's still clearly involved.
We didn't have too long at the terminus, just enough for the crew, Charlie and me to grab a bite to eat and hop back on the train. Once aboard, I asked Chris Johnson, head of delivery data collection, about just how much the vehicles in the infrastructure and monitoring fleet had transformed data collection and condition monitoring of assets on the network, enabling far more effective and preventative interventions that had been possible in the past.
So, Chris, just give us an idea of what this new measurement train and the other vehicles in the fleet can do for the railway. As a big picture, how much better and different is the railway because we've got this equipment?
Yeah, so I think there's probably three elements. So obviously it's a lot safer using the infrastructure monitoring fleet. We don't have to send people out to manually test the track. We can obviously cover a lot more mileage than manually testing the track. So for instance, the NMT, some of the shifts we can cover 800 miles in a shift. And then also you get the interaction with the track, so you get a dynamic measurement. So those three things are a benefit over sort of manual measurement. And from an overall sort of overarching picture, it enables us to predict and prevent faults. So engineers are getting that data in a timely manner. They're getting regular data, regular intervals to be able to trend it. And so ultimately what we're providing is a safe and reliable network for both freight and passenger.
So just give us an idea of the stats then. So how many miles, obviously miles and kilometres, I don't know, but how many miles of track are you now regularly testing with this equipment?
So for PLPR, we record about 14,000 miles every 4 weeks. So that's what we're covering for that. With ultrasonics, we cover about 17,000 miles of the network, so that's at different frequencies depending on the track category. So the most frequent record for ultrasonics is every 8 weeks. And then for track geometry, that's interlinked with PLPR, so 14,000 every 4 weeks. And then we do probably another 4,000 on top of that at various frequencies, some of the branch lines and places like that.
And 20 odd years ago, that would all have been done manually.
Some of it done with monitoring fleet, but yeah, we're covering virtually everything now with a monitoring fleet, which equates to about 2,500 shifts we do as a team each year.
Are we getting to the point where we need to be looking at modernising? I suppose the technology has moved on significantly since then.
Yeah, so we've had iterations of the technology that's on here, but there is we have money secured funding in CP7 for an infrastructure monitoring program. That's a team of people that are looking at the next generation, so replacing what we have now or enhancing what we have now, maybe with systems on passenger trains and other options like that. So that's hopefully going to start to deliver around 2027.
Presumably you can put a lot of monitoring equipment now on many trains, which almost goes a long way to just getting even better real-time data across the whole network. Is that now possible?
Yeah, so certainly there's track geometry systems on passenger trains. I mean, the limiting probably capabilities ultrasonics, which still needs to sort of run sort of maybe a maximum of 45 miles an hour. So that does limit that. The challenge that comes with all of that is managing that data. So that's a key part of that program, is making sure that out of all that data you're collecting, you sort of give the end users those problematic areas rather than inundating them with lots and lots of data.
And can you use presumably algorithms and computer programs to actually sift through vast amounts of data and turn it into usable information?
Yeah, and that's what we do with PLPR. So, we collect hundreds and hundreds of miles every day, and we've got business rules and algorithms that then search that data and pull out what is a critical defect and present someone to then make a decision on that.
Before too long, we were heading back to Derby and alongside the yard in front of the former British Rail Technical Centre, somewhere I had spent many hours in the past when buying the Class 390 Pendolinos. It was a good reminder that the railway is always pushing at boundaries to design new and more efficient ways to do things, whether it's tilting trains or track monitoring. Thank heavens for railway engineers and the constant thirst for knowledge and innovation.
Well, what an amazing day. I mean, that has just been really interesting. Trip down from Derby over to Skegness and back. Just seen so much on that train. The pattern recognition, the track geometry, all the other technologies on there. But it's kind of less about what the technology is and more about what it does. It allows predictive maintenance and interventions long before they become a problem. And, as the guy said, it's really transformed the way we do infrastructure management and assessment on the railway. Thank you so much to Network Rail, to Chris and to Dave and to Andy on the train, to Tracy for setting the whole thing up and looking after us during the day. Been really, really interesting, very enjoyable. Hope you enjoyed that. And stay tuned for some more behind the scenes on green signals in the future.
Well, that was really good, Richard. I absolutely loved that because we've all seen it. And you're right about it being around a long time. When you said that, and while the thing was playing, I was having a think. And it was, do you remember Richard Middleton at Railtrack?
Yes.
It was Richard who actually told me for the first time, hey, Nigel, I'm going to get an HST and fill it with survey equipment to survey the track. So that would have been 20, the thick end of 25 years ago. We tend to think they're fairly recent.
Yeah.
But it is we had the PLPR carriage, which was brand new at the time, at Rail Live a few years ago, and two things stick in my mind. One was the absolute passion of the guys and the girls working it. They were just completely devoted to it, and they told me at the time we were world leaders then in plain line pattern recognition. And did you know that it started in the food industry? The tech.
I did not.
I'll tell you why briefly. They have this sort of equipment. You're not going to believe this, but it's true. Surveying pizzas, and it has to recognize the pattern to make sure all the mushrooms, pineapple, or whatever else. And if anything's missing, it chucked it out. And somebody had the bright idea we could use that on track.
That's very clever. I did not know that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Now, it was good. It was good.
You had
it
a
was
good
lovely
time.
to see. I had a great time. It was lovely to see a power car named John Armitt.
Yes.
As I said in the video, he's still involved, which is absolutely terrific.
And did Charlie enjoy it?
It was superb. No, he really did enjoy it and learnt a lot, which hopefully will all be very helpful.
You had the luxury of a production assistant for shooting that video.
I did. So he was serving a purpose, and it was serving a purpose. So all very good.
Good old Charlie.
Shall we do the quiz?
I think we should, because it's always the highlight of my week. Shall we do the quiz? I know I'm going to find something funny. So off we go.
Really? Okay. I'm glad we've brought a little ray of sunshine into your week,
Richard,
Nigel.
you always bring a ray of sunshine into my life.
Right, anyway, moving swiftly on. Last week's question was, as predicted, a little bit easier than certainly was the previous one that no one got right. And it was this. And the question was, actually, got to give a shout out. This was Steph's question. It was a brilliant question. Who would I be train spotting with? And what would we be looking for if I walked from Ollie's Yard to Kilty Vale? And loads of you got it, which must mean loads of people share another childhood passion of Steph's and yours and mine, because the answer, of course, was the famous five. I think it's five. Is it five go off to camp? I think it may be, but it's the famous five, and they would be looking for spook trains. So that was the answer. Famous five looking for spook trains. And the winner out of the randomized sorting hat this week was Trevor Stone. So Trevor, I know Trevor's a big Green Signal fan and listener. So Trevor, just drop us another email if you can at quiz@greensignals.org or info@greensignals.org, whichever, doesn't matter.
Well done,
Let
Trev.
us know.
We
Indeed,
love
so
the
let us know where you would like us to send your mug, which takes us on to this week's quiz. And the question this week's one of the ones sent to us by listener Chris Cook, and it is a cracker, a really cracker. This. It is this. Where on the GB Rail network would you find 5 consecutive stations on a line, each of which has at least one occurrence of the letter Y in their name? And when travelling in the up direction, where would the next station with a Y be? B as in the letter B, E, the word B, right? Anyway,
Yes,
I've probably just over-explained that, right? So 5 stations, all of which have got the letter Y in, and where, if you're going in the up direction, would the next one be? It's a great question.
We have to say the first bit of the question's hard enough. The supplementary is just a killer, isn't it?
Well, I think if you've got the first, the second's fairly straightforward, but getting that first bit's tough. If you think you know the answer, email us to quiz@greensignals.org. You've got till midday on Saturday, the 31st of August, after which we'll put all the correct answers in a hat and pick the winner out at random. There you go.
Love the quiz. Really caught on, hasn't it? Total engagement. Readers and listeners and watchers sending questions in now. Just great. Well, thank you, Chris Cook. Right. Let us proceed to the next section. A lovely, quirky little story this week that self-confessed prolific public transport rider Emily Turner, who also hosts the All on This Together podcast, tweeted about, and which listener Peter Mugridge brought to our attention. The story is about the All Aboard to Northampton project that London North Western Railway have underway at Northampton Station. It's the brainchild of retail travel advisor Elliot Badger, and the plan is to display a ticket from every single station in the UK for a journey to Northampton. So a Thurso to Northampton ticket, a Dover Priory to Northampton ticket, and so on. A ticket collector's dream. The pictures on X are literally amazing, and we'll put a link on the website so you can find them easily. And Emily wrote the other day that she thinks LNWR are about to publish a list of the ones they still need. So if anyone at LNWR is listening, do send us a list and we'll stick a link on our website too. What do you think of that?
I love this. It's so random, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and those pictures are just superb. They are brilliant. So thank you, Emily, and well done, Elliot, and well done, LNWR, for supporting this. It's brilliant.
It's good to see that with all the problems of railways, people are paying attention to some of this sort of stuff alongside, because it brings it life and community and everything else, doesn't it? And sadly, that's all we've got time for this week. More videos from Richard means less talk from us both here. Thanks so much for watching or listening. Please give us a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. It makes a real difference. And if you're not already a member, do click that join button on YouTube and pick which level you'd like to join at, or head over to Patreon to find out what's on offer. But most importantly, do join us again next week, because these shows always will remain free. So, until then, and we'll see you again, it's goodbye from me, Nigel Harris, and...
it's goodbye from me, Richard Bowker.
Thanks for being with us. See you soon.